guys, it's Ariana. Welcome back to my channel. So for tonight's video, we're going to be reading some more scary stories. So as per usual, I have my wicked candle in here. It smells like caramel apples. It's setting the mood for some spooky stories. I have a bunch of stories from Instagram, a couple from my email, and a few from Reddit that I want to read today. I don't know if I'm going to get through all of them, but I will try my best to read as many of them as I can. Without further ado, let's jump into some of the stories. So I'm going to start with Instagram because I do have a bunch on Instagram that I need to read. So I'm not going to tell you guys the Instagram handles or anything just because I don't know if you guys want to stay anonymous or not, so I'm just going to jump into the stories. When I was about 12, we moved to a farm that was quite out of town. We moved because my mom met my now stepfather. My dad passed away when I was 2, so I never had to sleep in my own room. I always slept with my mom, but now because she met someone, it meant I had to have my own room. So here's the first thing that happened. When my parents used to go away, my grandparents would always look after me, and they would get up very early to pack my lunch and get everything ready for the day. I woke up at about 4 a.m. feeling uneasy. I woke up to my dog running down the hallway to my room. I heard his nails tap on the tiled floors. When he usually gets to my room, he jumps onto my bed. But this time, he didn't. I sat up right to look for him, but he wasn't in my room at all. Something in my head told me to get the hell out of there, and I ran downstairs to the kitchen. That's where I found my grandma packing my lunch, and my dog sleeping in his bed. I asked my grandma if my dog had left the kitchen, and she said no. She said all the doors were closed this entire time. I don't really have an explanation for what happened. A little while after that, I woke up in the middle of the night to the shoes in my cupboard being thrown around. It was loud, and I saw the cupboard doors getting hit with shoes. I just pulled the covers over my head, waited for it to stop, and I tried to go back to sleep. The next morning I opened my cupboard, and sure enough, the shoes were not neatly packed anymore. When I went downstairs, my mom asked me what I was doing last night and why I was being so loud, so I knew it wasn't my imagination. My posters on my wall were always messed up when I got home from school. The one that was always in the middle would be on the left, switched with another one, and so on. Even a photo of my dad in a frame that was on my wall would be on the floor, like it was thrown across the room. It was terrifying, so I didn't want to sleep in my room. I experienced apparitions at the end of my bed, black figures staring at me from the corners of my room, and I completely stopped sleeping in there after this. But my mom got tired of this and told me that I should try sleeping in there again. After I started sleeping in my room, I began hearing noises at night. It sounded like someone was pacing around my bed. Footsteps were super loud. It got so bad, I told my mom once again I would not sleep in there. Of course, throughout this whole experience, my mom didn't believe a word I told her and said it was just my imagination. After telling her again that I would not sleep in there because I was hearing noises, she said she would sleep in there with me to hear these so-called noises. We went to bed and fell asleep right away because I felt safe. At about 2 or 3, I woke up to my mom calling my name. She told me that she can't sleep in there because she heard it too. She told me to take a pillow and a blanket and come sleep in her bed. She said I never had to sleep in there again because she believed me. We lived there for another 5 years, and other stuff happened too if you'd like me to send some more. And they sent me more stories. So they said, the next thing that happened was with my friends. My best friend and her 3 siblings were sleeping over at the farmhouse on a weekend. On the first night, we all went to shower and bath in my parents' room. The house was very big, and so was their bathroom. So me and my best friend and her sister bathed, and her 2 brothers showered. After we were done, we had to go back to our room to go to get dressed. Her brother went first, and he came storming back into the bathroom. He said that someone was standing in the end of the hallway, close to where the room was. All 5 of us went to look, and we all saw it. A black shadow standing at the end of the hallway. We all got very scared, but ended up hyping ourselves up to just run back to my room at the same time. We opened the door and dashed to my room, and the black figure was gone. All 5 of us ended up sleeping in my room that night. None of my friends ever wanted to sleep at my house after sleeping there that one time. They were always so scared, especially if we had to sleep in my room. We always ended up sleeping on the couches or the living room because they refused to sleep in my room. Keep in mind, I never told them what happened to me because I was scared, and I didn't want them to not come back over. Another thing that also always happened is that my radio would always turn off on its own. I would turn my radio on before I went to bed, but when I would wake up in the middle of the night, it would be turned off. I thought it was my mom, but I asked her, and she said she would never turn it off. I would turn it back on, and then I would wake up to it being off again, or the station would be changed, or it would just be static. I don't have any history on the house, so I don't know what might have happened there before we moved in, but I do have pictures of it. I just know that my room was the center of it all, because that's where everything happened. And that's their entire story. So they just had a lot of weird experiences in that farmhouse, and they ended up not wanting to sleep in their room at all because it was just absolutely bonkers in there. So that's really cool. I'm very happy you sent me your story. That's really, really scary. Hey girl, I just found your YouTube a couple days ago, and I thought I would share a story about my mom's best friend, Jessica. A little backstory on my mom and Jessica first. Like I said, they were best friends, and Jessica had been going through a lot of bullying by peers, and by the sound of what my mom was saying, there were some underlying issues. But one night, she was having a hard time and tried to call my mom. My mom was at a party, so she couldn't answer. Sadly, that night, Jessica took her own life. My mom went through all the stages of depression because she blamed herself for not being there when she needed her, burning all pictures and letters. Fast forward about 7 years, and I'm 3 or 4 years old. My mom and my aunt and I were sitting in the living room, and they were talking as they played. All of a sudden, I started talking to someone. My mom casually asked, "Who are you talking to?" Thinking it was going to be me talking to one of my toys, something a child would normally do, I said in a very sweet voice, "I'm talking to your friend Jessica." My aunt and my mom looked at each other, both confused and also a little scared. And my aunt pulls me on her lap and says, "Jessica? Is Jessica here now?" I responded, "Yes, she's right there. Can't you see her?" I'm not entirely sure what they did after that, but fast forward a few days, and my mom is going through an old drawer that had a bunch of pictures of our whole family in them, and she came across the last glamour shot of Jessica she had because she had burned the rest. I took the picture and I said, "That's her. That's Jessica." My mom burst into tears, and without missing a beat, I go, "Mommy, Jessica wants you to know that it's not your fault." Then I never saw her again. I 1000% believe she wanted me to relay the message to a friend. Basically, that she needs to let go of the burden of thinking it was her fault. I have plenty of other stories from growing up if you do want to hear them. Sorry it was so long. And I said you can send as many of your stories as you want. Hate when kids see things that you can't see. That's terrifying. Oh my God. So thank you so much for sending me your story. That is so fucking creepy. And I'm glad it had a nicer ending though, but it's still really creepy. And the cars will not stop fucking going by. I swear to God, I'm so sick of living here. I'm gonna move. So there's a story from Reddit that I want to read, and it's really good. So this is from the True Scary Story section, and it's from the Reddit author crying_cryptid, and it's titled Haunted Cabin Behind My House. Long story. This is a relatively old story that my dad has told me a few times over the years. But with Halloween coming up, it's been on my mind again. I myself have never been able to witness the house, though the description I've been given by multiple men 20 or something years after seeing it gave me a very vivid mental image. To begin, I would like to mention that my father is a highly religious man. He's a preacher's son and does not believe in ghosts or anything paranormal in the slightest. Nothing seems to spook him either, but he still swears up and down that he felt something unnatural that scared the shit out of him, even just from mentioning the story to me on the rare occasion when he would bring it up. Back in the late 80s, he and a few friends would regularly hike over the Waterfall Creek bed behind our farm and would follow the trail up until they eventually met the footage off the road of the interstate. Well, one night, they decided to take a different route to go around the backside to another farmer's land, mostly to see the animals because they owned emus and other large pets that weren't common in the local area. Supposedly, after leaving the area and continuing into the woods, it was around nighttime, they managed to stumble upon what is described by all 5 men 20 years later as a Blair Witch look-alike house. It was a very old home, and my dad claims that just by looking at it, it gave him an ominous feeling. But of course, they had to go inside to check it out. Inside the house was a vintage cottage-style home that was probably built in the late 40s or early 50s, and the group was instantly met with writing and symbols in strange Latin-like languages with a few English graffiti pieces that quoted a supposed satanic or pagan worshipping ritual, with certain pieces describing how to sacrifice a human soul. My father still claims to this day that certain symbols were painted on the walls in blood, while others were clearly spray paint. I find it easier to believe because he also worked as a firefighter for years before this happened, and a lot of experience with having seen human blood and dismembered bodies on the freeway after car accidents. Past a small kitchen living area was a stairwell that was small, and your shoulders would physically brush either side of the wall as they went up the stairs. At the top of the stairs, a door led to a large attic-style bedroom where actual chain manacles and locks hung from one side of the wall by a circular window at the end of the room, which was also completely covered in weird symbols, graffiti, and now more obvious and frightening, large puddles of blood that had seeped into the floors and walls. Allegedly, once they were upstairs investigating, they swear they heard someone moving up the stairwell behind them, but when they looked back, there was no one there. Everyone essentially told me that it sounded almost like heels cracking on wood, were now completely scared. They rushed back down the stairs to see if someone was playing a prank on them and was hiding downstairs. Surprise, surprise, they found nothing, and no footprints in the dust and grime that differed from the ones they left on their way in. To keep things interesting, I met with each of the guys separately to ask them about what they remembered, expecting to maybe find a crack or something to prove that maybe they were exaggerating. But when I asked them, I got the same answer from each of them with no hesitation. They got the same details right down to the minute that they entered the house and the minute they left. But here's where it gets really strange. They left the house and for some unknown reason decided to try walking back from a different route. Using a compass to approach from the east instead of the south, they did this test more than 10 times, walking from every possible route or direction, yet they always came up to the front entrance of the house. even when the compass and common knowledge of the area showed it was physically impossible to be at the south end of the house when they moved in a straight line from the north to east or west. There probably is some scientific explanation for it, but I haven't found one. These guys knew these woods literally like the back of their hand and still do to this day. The final time that these guys came back and found themselves standing at the front door of the house, they began to feel physically ill, verging on feverish and finally deciding that it was time to give up when one of them nearly fainted. As they turned to leave, the man who nearly fainted looked up and points at the circular window at the front of the house. Everyone looks and immediately sees a tall female figure hunched over, standing in the window, watching them. Though they see no features on her face other than two large, dark-colored eyes, and it sort of shuffled in place before turning and walking away as if it was heading towards the stairs at the end of the room. At the sight of the figure actually moving, they all took off running through the woods, ending up on the side of the interstate about 3 miles from my dad's house. They eventually made it back to my dad's place, though they claimed that they felt as if someone was following them the entire way back. That night, my dad's cousin got up to get some water from the kitchen, only to announce that he swore he saw the same figure standing outside the kitchen window near the edge of the woods. Thankfully, nothing ever came from the experience other than a collective state of absolute terror when the subject is brought up. They wrote off what his cousin saw as paranoia, though 5 years later, they decided to return to see if the house was still standing. Miraculously, it had fallen in on itself and was nothing more than a pile of rubble, and they never went back. I always joked with my dad and would ask him what he would do if he went back and found the house standing the same way it was back then, trying to give him a reason to let me go see the place for myself. But with trespassing laws being far more prevalent in today's times, it would be nearly impossible without either getting shot or going to jail, as it was not our property. I don't know. It always gives me the creeps thinking about it, but I never considered the story to be true until I did this little mock interview with all of the guys. When I say that these grown men are scared to death by this story, I mean it. Seeing them get physically worked up and frightened by just telling the story really caused me to be less of a skeptic. What do you guys think? Could it possibly be that they were just spooked and it caused them to see things? I don't know. So this Reddit author is more just asking, like, do you guys have any idea what this could possibly be? All that's going through my head is you guys literally found the Blair Witch house, because your dad and his friends literally went in the opposite direction of this house and ended up back at the house like 10 times in the same night. Like, something was bringing them back to that house. And I remember the Blair Witch, like, I think I've only ever seen it once. Like, it's not a very good movie. It always brought them back to like the same spot, and they were like trapped in this circle, and like that's all that reminded me of, and that's fucking terrifying. And then you guys go home and your cousin sees the same figure outside your guys' fucking house that same night. That's so creepy. 0 out of 10. I would fucking hate that. That's so terrifying. Oh my God, I don't even know. I have no words. That's so fucking creepy. Okay, so I'm gonna read one more story and then I'm gonna end the video. This one is gonna be from my email. So this one's titled The Great Library. Hi, I have an experience I wish to share from my childhood. I want to begin first by describing myself with a little background for context. I am a man who is strongly logical, sensible, and practical with a composed mind. So I don't really believe in things unless I see it or hear it or feel it for myself, or have variable and undeniable evidence. I have a very strong memory, some even say photographic. Having said that, I'm recollecting an account from my early childhood when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I'm about to turn 36 this year, so I don't really take these things lightly. I'm the youngest in my family with 3 other siblings. In my infant and toddler years, we lived pretty well off until the economy took a turn for the worst and my father lost his job, and my mother's sister suggested that we move halfway across the country near her so she could help our family in our time of need. At this time, my mother was a stay-at-home mom, so she could raise us. We moved 4 times. Having moved so often, I didn't really have any friends, so I spent most of my times reading books in libraries at my schools. At this time, my mother was studying multiple career options and going to the university at downtown pursuing an MBA. With my father working and my siblings not around to babysit, my mother was not able to find a babysitter for me. I would naturally join her when she would go and do research and study at the public library downtown. I would go frequently with her, and I nicknamed it the Great Library. I'm not sure why I gave it that name, but I believe it was because it held a lot of heavy textbooks and research materials compared to the school libraries that I was used to. The library was much larger than what I was used to, and I recall it having multiple floors, including a basement. Of course, the normal books were a bit too advanced for me, so I would go to the children's section while my mother studied. I will never understand why, but for some reason, they had the children's section located solely in the basement. Maybe it was the only space they had to put all the children's books, or maybe it was a sick joke. I remember there only being one way to get there, and it was through an old elevator. There may have been other ways to get down there, like the stairs, but I just always took the elevator. My mother and I frequently went to this library in the late afternoon all the way through the evening and the night. I distinctly remember not really seeing any other kids in the children's section in the basement. I mean, sometimes in the late afternoon, I might see 1 or 2 kids, but I never saw more than 1 staff member at most, especially towards the end of the night or at any given time. When I would enter the children's section, I do remember seeing down the majority of the aisles books strewn about across the floor as if a child had bad behavior, was having a tantrum, or just going around knocking books down. This was actually very common for me to see, and I never thought much of it, despite never really ever seeing kids around. On some occasions, I would actually see books flying off the bookshelves onto the ground. Sometimes they looked like they just fell off, while other times I would see them wiggle out like they were struggling to get out, as if tightly clinched between books or bookends. But that wasn't the strangest thing I witnessed. You have to remember that this was a basement, so it was minimally constructed to the bare minimum. The walls were hard and the floor was pure cement, with no carpeting or rugs or floor mats, like a tunnel. Very rarely when I was inside the children's section, I would hear what sounded like footsteps of an animal. The only way I could describe it was like that of a dog or a fox, with a consistent rhythmic pattern. I remember on a couple occasions that I would come out to the hallway to see who was walking around with a dog or whatever it was, and when I went into the hallway, I wouldn't see anything, but I would still distinctly hear the footsteps and even the sound of a wagging tail. I grew up listening to classical music, and it was my favorite genre of music to listen to at that age, even to this day. This only happened to me one time, and probably because I never went back to the library after my experience. But one night, as the library was coming to a close, I remember I was inside the children's section when I definitely heard what sounded like a violin being played somewhere in the distance. I have very strong and sensitive hearing, and sounds bounce off and echo so easily with the concrete floors and hard walls. Of course, with me being the fearless yet curious young child I was and love for classical music, I just had to know who was playing. So I went into the hallway and kind of wandered around exploring, trying to locate where the music was coming from. I looked in a few rooms as I neared the music. Most of these rooms appeared to be storage rooms, some barren, while others had a few boxes or supplies. As it got louder and louder, I knew I was getting closer. As I got closer and located where the music became clear, I was definitely certain there was somebody inside. What sounded like to me was a beginner practicing the scales or something on a violin. I didn't want to interrupt, so I slowly opened the door and peeked inside. To my surprise, it was an empty room, dimly lit. There were no boxes, no chairs. There was no speakers or intercoms, no radios, no televisions, not even a single wire as far as I could tell. Yet the music was right there. It freaked me out, and I got out of there as quick as I could. I hate taking the elevator back up alone this late in the evening, even though I was used to it, but it would be the last time I ever took the elevator. And that's how they ended their story. So that's so fucking creepy. So like you saw books like wiggling off the shelf as if somebody was like pulling them off, but there was nobody there, and like that you actually saw them fall off yourself. That's really creepy. And then the violin, oh my God, that's so fucking creepy. Especially as like a kid, I would definitely went searching for it. I would have been so curious who was playing a violin. And then to find the room where the music is and walk in there and hear the music, but see no one, that's so creepy. Oh my God. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Your story was really amazing, and that is fucking terrifying. So I think this is where I'm gonna end the video tonight. If you guys wanna send me any more of your scary stories, paranormal stories, let's not meet stories, or any just creepy story in general, please reach out to me over my email, or you can reach out to me over Instagram. My information will be listed in a comment down below, and it'll also be listed in my description box. If you guys are ever curious what email it is or what my Instagram is and it's not listed as a comment, just click the description box with all of my information and you'll see all the info there. But thank you so much for watching this video. If you guys did enjoy this video, please make sure to give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below for more content like this, and I will see you guys at the next video. Bye.